Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through messages on my phone, when a voice note from Kalista popped up. "Hi, Lorraine," she began, her voice bright and cheerful, a little too cheerful. "Just wanted to let you know about the annual get-together. We're doing it a bit differently this year." My heart sank. I knew what was coming. More of a friend thing this year, really. Super casual. She paused, then added, "So you know, we figured it best to keep it small." The message ended with a chirpy, "Hope you understand." Understand. Of course, I understood. It was the same subtle dismissal I'd been experiencing for months, ever since Kalista and my son, Marek, had gotten engaged. I set my phone down, the ceramic clicking against the granite countertop. Small, right? Too small for his own mother. I stared out at the garden, the roses blooming in vibrant shades of pink and red, a stark contrast to the dull ache in my chest. I remembered planting those roses with Marek when he was just a boy, his small hands carefully patting down the soil around the delicate roots. Now he barely called, let alone visited. "He's busy, Mom," he'd say when I asked. "Wedding planning takes up a lot of time." But I knew deep down that Kalista was the orchestrator of my slow, steady erasure from their lives. The kettle whistled, pulling me from my thoughts. I made another cup of coffee, the familiar aroma small comfort. I picked up a framed photo from the counter, a picture of Marek, Ava, and me taken at my vacation home last summer. Ava, my granddaughter, her bright eyes sparkling with laughter, had her arms wrapped round my neck. It felt like a lifetime ago. This year, they hadn't even mentioned the annual trip. Probably too busy. I muttered to myself, too busy for family, too busy for me. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Kalista. This one was a group photo. Everyone gathered around a barbecue, laughing and talking. Julian, Kalista's ever-present fiancé, had his arms slung possessively round her waist. Marek stood slightly apart, a forced smile plastered on his face. Ava, however, looked directly at the camera, a small frown creasing her brow. It was as if she knew I was missing, as if she sensed the deliberate exclusion. The caption read, "Perfect family weekend." My hand tightened on the phone, my knuckles turning white. Perfect for whom? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Anger wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't bring my son back. It wouldn't mend the fractured pieces of our family. But a quiet resolve began to form within me. I wouldn't be erased. I wouldn't be ignored. I deserved to be a part of their lives, especially Ava's. She was my granddaughter, and I wouldn't let Kalista take that away from me. I called my property manager, Mr. Henderson. He handled the rentals for my vacation home, the one we'd always gone to as a family. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I was just wondering about bookings for the next few weeks. Anything interesting come up?" There was a slight pause. "Actually, Mrs. Lorraine," he replied, "there is a booking starting tomorrow. Ms. Kalista booked it for the week." He sounded hesitant, almost apologetic. I knew he'd always assumed our family would be the ones using the house this time of year. "Kalista, you say?" I asked, feigning surprise. "How interesting." I thanked him and hung up, a small smile playing on my lips. Interesting indeed. I started packing a bag, a sense of anticipation building within me. I carefully folded my favorite summer dress, the one Ava always complimented me on. I packed a few of her favorite board games, the ones we used to play together on the porch overlooking the lake. I wasn't going to confront them, not directly. I wouldn't stoop to Kalista's level. No, my revenge would be far more subtle, far more effective. I would simply reclaim what was mine. I would remind them, without saying a word, that I was still here, still a part of this family, whether Kalista liked it or not. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across my kitchen floor. I zipped up my bag, the sound a quiet promise of what was to come. Tomorrow, I would be home. Tomorrow, things would change. The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands, but the chamomile tea did little to soothe the burning in my chest. Kalista's voice note from last night played on a loop in my mind. Oh, and Mom Lorraine, with the reunion being just immediate family this year, we figured you'd probably prefer a quiet weekend at home. It was the kind of polite dismissal that felt like a slap disguised as a caress. She knew how much I looked forward to these reunions, to seeing everyone, especially Ava, my granddaughter. Ava was the light of my life, and Julian, though quiet, always treated me with respect. It was just Kalista, always Kalista. I glanced at the family photo on the fridge, taken just last summer at the lake house. I was in it, squeezed in at the edge, almost out of frame. Another subtle nudge, another gentle push to the periphery. Remember that time you nearly tripped into the lake, Mom? Kalista had chirped as she snapped the picture. Everyone had laughed. I had laughed too, but the memory felt different now, coated in a thin film of unease. Had she positioned me there deliberately? The thought pricked at me, a tiny barb of suspicion. This wasn't the first time Kalista had edged me out. There was Marek's birthday dinner last year. "We're keeping it small, Mom," Kalista had said, her hand resting possessively on Marek's arm. "Just a few close friends." And the Christmas gathering the year before, where I'd arrived to find the house already buzzing with laughter, the best seats taken, the conversation flowing smoothly without me. "Oh, you're here," Kalista had exclaimed, a little too brightly, a little too late. "We thought you might be delayed." Each incident, on its own, seemed insignificant, a minor oversight, easily dismissed. But together, they formed a pattern, a tapestry woven with threads of exclusion. I stared out the kitchen window, the morning sun glinting off the dew-kissed lawn. I had always prided myself on being a strong woman, a woman who could weather any storm. But this constant chipping away at my place in the family, it was wearing me down. The phone rang, startling me. It was Mrs. Henderson, the property manager of my vacation home up in the mountains. "Mrs. Peterson, just calling to confirm the booking for next weekend." "Everything set, right?" she asked. "Booking?" I frowned. "I haven't booked the house for next weekend." A flicker of unease, a premonition, ran through me. "But the booking is under your son's name, Marek Peterson. He confirmed it just yesterday," Mrs. Henderson replied, her voice tinged with confusion. "Marek and Kalista." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The family reunion. Immediate family only. They were at my vacation home, my sanctuary, celebrating without me. The chamomile tea turned to acid in my stomach. "Mrs. Peterson, Are you still there? Mrs. Henderson's voice crackled through the receiver. Yes, Mrs. Henderson, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Everything is fine. In fact, I'll be driving up there myself tomorrow. Please ensure the house is ready for my arrival. I hung up the phone, a strange calm settling over me. The burning in my chest hadn't subsided, but it had transformed. It was no longer the sting of hurt, but the slow simmer of resolve. The image of the family photo on the fridge flashed in my mind again. This time, I didn't see myself on the periphery. I saw myself at the center, at the heart of my own home, my own family. And I knew, with a certainty that surprised even me, that things were about to change. The drive up to the mountains was long, but the anticipation fueled me. I hadn't packed much, just a few essentials. This wasn't a vacation. This was a reclamation. Rain lashed against the window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. My phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Henderson next door. Lorraine, dear, is this your family at the lake house? Such a lovely surprise to see them. Attached was a photo. My stomach lurched. There, sprawled on the deck of my vacation home, were Kalista and Marek, drinks in hand, laughter etched on their faces. Julian was there too, his arm draped possessively around Kalista. My granddaughter, Ava, sat quietly by herself, sketching in a pad. They looked so content, like a family that didn't include me. I can't believe this, I muttered, my voice catching in my throat. The casual cruelty of it stung. Not a call, not a text, not even a fleeting thought to include me. My own son, enjoying the comforts of my home, as if I didn't exist. They didn't even ask, I whispered, the words heavy with anxious tears. This wasn't just about the house. It was about being erased, about being deemed irrelevant. I paced the living room, the rain outside intensifying, matching the turmoil inside. I picked up a framed photo of Marek and me from his graduation, a proud moment frozen in time. A different time. What happened to us? I asked the smiling face in the picture. He used to confide in me, share his dreams, his fears. Now there was a chasm between us, a silent wall built by Kalista's subtle manipulations. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mrs. Henderson. Oh, and Lorraine. I saw a rental car with their luggage. Looks like they're staying a while. A rental car. That meant they hadn't even driven Marek's car. They'd gone to the trouble of renting a separate vehicle, just to avoid the possibility of me seeing them. The thought struck me like a physical blow. This is deliberate, I said aloud, my voice trembling. She's doing this on purpose. Suddenly, a strange calm descended. The hurt remained, a dull ache in my chest. But something else was taking its place. Resolve. I wouldn't let her win. Kalista might have succeeded in excluding me, but she wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Evans, the property manager for the lake house. Hello, Mr. Evans, I said, my voice steady. It's Lorraine. I just wanted to confirm something. Did someone rent my lake house recently? There was a brief pause. Yes, ma'am, he replied. It's rented for the week. The name on the booking, let me see, is under Ms. Kalista Hayes. Thank you, Mr. Evans, I said, a small, icy smile playing on my lips. That's all I needed to know. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Kalista had made a mistake. A big one. She assumed I wouldn't find out. She assumed I would just disappear. She had underestimated me. I went upstairs and packed a small bag. Just the essentials. A change of clothes, my toiletries, and a good book. I paused, looking at a photograph on my dresser. It was a picture of me, Marek, and Ava, taken just a few years ago, before Kalista's insidious influence had begun to erode our family. Ava's bright, innocent smile warmed my heart. She was the only reason I hadn't completely given up on Marek. I hoped, deep down, that he was still in there somewhere, buried beneath layers of Kalista's control. I slipped the photo into my bag. I had a long drive ahead of me. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sun peeked through the clouds. It felt symbolic. As I pulled out of the driveway, a sense of purpose settled over me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my family. It was about reclaiming what was mine. It was about showing Kalista that she couldn't just erase me from the picture. I was still here, and I was coming home. The rain hammered against the window pane, each drop a tiny echo of the hollowness in my chest. I stared at the blurry lights of the city below, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the November air. Just hours ago, I'd received another breezy voice note from Kalista, my daughter-in-law. "Oh, and Mom," she'd chirped, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We're having a little family get-together next weekend. Just a small thing, so no need for you to make the trip. A small thing that somehow excluded me again." I knew what she meant. I wasn't family. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I dialed Angela, my property manager. "Angela, hi. It's Lorraine," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Lorraine, how are you?" Angela's voice was warm and familiar, a welcome contrast to the icy silence that had settled over my life. "I'm fine," I replied, hesitant. I had a quick question about the vacation house. "Of course. What can I do for you?" "I was just wondering, has anyone booked it for next weekend?" I held my breath, a strange mix of dread and anticipation churning in my stomach. There was a brief pause, the sound of rustling papers filling the silence. "Actually, yes," Angela said. "Someone booked it just yesterday, under the name Caitlin Miller." Caitlin Miller, Kalista's maiden name. My heart sank, the last vestiges of hope draining away. She hadn't even bothered to use a pseudonym. It was a blatant disregard, a deliberate act of exclusion. "Right," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Angela. Is everything all right, Lorraine?" Angela's voice was laced with concern. "Oh, yes, everything's fine," I lied, forcing a weak smile. "Just curious." "Thanks again." I hung up, the silence of the apartment suddenly deafening. I walked over to the window, the rain still falling relentlessly. Caitlin Miller. She hadn't even considered I might find out. Or perhaps she had. Perhaps she wanted me to find out. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and stinging. I wouldn't let her win. I wouldn't let her erase me from my own family. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, the image of Kalista laughing with my son, Marek, and my granddaughter, Ava, at my vacation home, playing on repeat in my mind. They were my family, yet I was a stranger, locked out of their lives. The thought was a physical ache, a constant pressure in my chest. I barely ate, barely slept. The rain continued to fall, mirroring the storm raging inside me. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions of my life work, errands, solitary meals, but my mind was elsewhere. I was planning, not a grand, theatrical revenge, but something quiet, something that would make them understand, make them see the pain they had inflicted. I booked a flight for Friday evening, the same day they were due to arrive at the house. I imagined their surprise, their confusion, when they found me there. It wouldn't be a confrontation, not yet, just a presence, a reminder that I existed. Friday finally arrived, and I found myself standing at the airport gate, a small bag in my hand. The flight was uneventful, the drone of the engine a lullaby to my simmering anger. I landed late, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. I rented a car and drove the familiar route to the house, the darkness broken only by the headlights cutting through the night. As I pulled up to the driveway, I saw the lights were on, warm and inviting. I could hear the faint sound of laughter coming from inside. They were already there. I parked the car a little way down the road, out of sight, and walked the rest of the way. I approached the house slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see them through the large living room window. Kalista and Julian were sitting on the sofa talking and laughing. Ava was playing on the floor, her face lit up by the glow of the television. They looked happy. A pang of sadness shot through me, a reminder of the family I had lost. But then the anger returned, a steady flame burning away the sadness. I walked up to the front door and quietly let myself in, using the spare key I had always kept. The sound of the latch clicking was barely audible, but it seemed to echo in the sudden silence that had fallen over the room. Kalista, Julian, and Ava all turned to look at me, their faces frozen in expressions of shock and disbelief. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. It was a statement. I was here. This was my house, and they were in my space. Ava was the first to break the silence. She ran towards me, her arms outstretched. "Grandma," she cried, her voice filled with genuine delight. I knelt down and hugged her tightly, burying my face in her soft hair. Over Ava's head, I caught Kalista's eye. Her face was pale, her expression a mixture of confusion and fear. I couldn't be sure, but I knew one thing. The game had changed. I was back in the picture, and I wasn't going anywhere. The weekend had just begun. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I stared at the half-eaten breakfast on my plate, the toast growing cold and soggy, just like my hope. I picked up my phone, the screen still displaying the family photo Kalista had sent. Everyone was there beaming, except me. "We're all having such a wonderful time at the lake house, Mom." Kalista's cheerful voice note from yesterday echoed in my mind, each word a tiny, sharp jab. "Wish you were here. The lake house. My lake house. The one I'd poured my heart and soul into. The one I'd always envisioned filled with family laughter and shared memories. The one I hadn't visited in months." A sudden, strange calm settled over me. "I think," I said aloud to the empty room, "a change of scenery might do me good." I called Maria, my property manager. Maria, how's the lake house doing? Everything all right there? I tried to sound casual, as if the thought of my own property's well-being had just crossed my mind. Oh, it's doing wonderfully, Mrs. Carter. In fact, it's occupied at the moment. Maria's voice was bright and efficient. Occupied. I hadn't authorized any rentals. Occupied. I repeated, my voice thinner than I intended. By whom? There was a slight hesitation on the other end. By your son, Marek, and his family, Mrs. Carter. Kalista arranged it. So, that's how it was. Not only was I excluded, but my own home was being used without my knowledge. My sanctuary invaded. I see. I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Thank you, Maria. That's all I needed to know. I hung up the phone, the quiet hum of the dial tone amplifying the emptiness of the kitchen. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just about the house. It was about respect, about family, about my place in their lives, or rather the glaring absence of it. They thought they could erase me, pretend I didn't exist. They thought they could enjoy my sanctuary without me. They were wrong. A new thought, sharp and clear, cut through the fog of hurt. I wouldn't confront them, not directly. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scene, of seeing my pain. No, I would do something much more effective. I would show them, not tell them. I packed a small bag, the familiar motions strangely comforting. A few essential toiletries, a comfortable sweater, my favorite book. As I zipped the bag closed, a small, almost involuntary smile played on my lips. I checked the weather forecast for the lake sunny and mild for the next few days. Perfect. I grabbed my car keys, the metal cool against my palm. It was a 2-hour drive, and the rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and crisp. I rolled down the window, letting the wind whip through my hair, a strange sense of anticipation building within me. The closer I got, the more determined I became. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my home, my family, my peace. As I pulled into the driveway of the lake house, the late afternoon sun glinted off the water, painting the scene in a deceptively serene light. Several cars were parked haphazardly on the lawn, and I could hear the muffled sounds of laughter and chatter coming from inside. I parked my car a little distance away, in the shade of a large oak tree, where I wouldn't be immediately noticed. I sat there for a moment, watching the house, my house filled with the people who were supposed to be my family. I took a deep breath, the cool lake air filling my lungs. This wasn't how I'd envisioned this weekend, but then again, nothing had been going according to plan lately. I got out of the car, my movements deliberate and calm. I walked towards the house, my footsteps silent on the soft grass. I could see through the large windows that Kalista and Julian were inside, along with Marek and my granddaughter, Ava. They were gathered round the fireplace, playing a board game, oblivious to my presence. I reached the front door, my hand hovering over the knob. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Then I opened the door and stepped inside. The sound of the latch clicking echoed through the room, silencing the laughter. For heads turned, for pairs of eyes widening in surprise, then disbelief. Kallista's face paled, her carefully arranged smile faltering. "Mom," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. What are you doing here? I smiled, a small, gentle smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I came home, I said softly. Ava, my granddaughter, jumped up from her seat and ran towards me, her face alight with joy. Grandma, she cried, throwing her arms around me. You came, and in that moment, as I held my granddaughter close, I knew I had done the right thing. The California sun beat down on the hood of my car, the highway stretching ahead like a shimmering ribbon. It's a beautiful drive, my Aunt Millie had always said, her voice a comforting echo in my memory. She'd adored this coastal route, the way the hills dipped and rolled, revealing glimpses of the sparkling Pacific. This journey, though, carried a different weight. I gripped the steering wheel, Millie's words a bittersweet reminder of happier times, of family gatherings that no longer included me. Kalista's voice note still stung, that saccharine sweet tone delivering the thinly veiled exclusion. Oh, Lorraine, we figured you'd prefer a quiet weekend at home while we're at the beach house. The beach house. My beach house. The one Millie had left me, the place where generations of our family had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and simply the joy of being together. It's your legacy, Lorraine, Millie had told me, her hand clasped tightly over mine. Now, that legacy felt tainted, stolen. I glanced at the passenger seat. A small framed photo of Millie sat there, her kind eyes seeming to watch me. Don't worry, Millie, I murmured, a small, determined smile playing on my lips. I'm not letting them take this from me. I'd called Thomas, the property manager, earlier that week. Just checking in on the beach house, Thomas, I'd said casually. Everything all right. His hesitant reply had confirmed my suspicions. Actually, Mrs. Vance, someone rented the house for the week. A Miss Kalista Vance. He'd sounded apologetic, almost embarrassed. I wasn't aware you weren't informed. He knew. Everyone knew. Kalista had deliberately gone behind my back, assuming I wouldn't find out. She'd underestimated me. The coastal air grew thicker, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. I rolled down the window, letting the breeze wash over my face, a calming contrast to the simmering anger within. As I neared the town, familiar landmarks started to appear. The old ice cream parlor where Millie used to buy us double scoops. The quirky antique shop she'd always drag me into. You never know what treasures you'll find, she'd say, her eyes twinkling with mischief. This time, I was hunting for a different kind of treasure, the satisfaction of reclaiming what was mine. I drove past the weathered sign that marked the turnoff to the beach house. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. As I pulled into the driveway, the scene that unfolded before me confirmed everything. Cars lined the street, beach towels draped over the porch railing, the faint sound of laughter drifting from the open windows. They were here. Kalista, Julian, Marek, even my granddaughter, Ava. They'd settled in, made themselves comfortable in my home, as if it were their own. I parked my car a little distance away, out of sight, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. The plan had been so simple, so elegant. I wouldn't announce my arrival. No dramatic confrontations, no raised voices. I would simply be there, a silent observer, a ghost from the past reminding them that this place, this legacy, wasn't theirs to steal. I reached into the glove compartment and retrieved the key, the cold metal a comforting weight in my palm. Millie had given me this years ago, a symbolic passing of the torch. "This house is yours now, Lorraine," she'd said. "Take care of it." I walked towards the house, my footsteps quiet on the gravel path. The front door was slightly ajar, offering a glimpse into the living room. Kalista was perched on the arm of the sofa, laughing at something Julian had said. Marek was flipping burgers on the grill, a forced smile plastered on his face. He looked uncomfortable, caught between his wife and his mother. And Ava, my sweet Ava, was sitting by the window, a book in her lap, but her eyes kept drifting towards the family photos on the mantelpiece. Photos that included me. Photos that Kalista had tried to erase, to rewrite our family history without me. I paused at the doorstep, my hand hovering over the doorknob. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. The key turned smoothly in the lock, the soft click echoing in the sudden hush of the afternoon. I pushed the door open, stepping into the house, into my legacy. All eyes turned to me, surprise, confusion, and a flicker of something else, fear. I simply smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice calm and steady. I thought I'd join the party. The look on Kalista's face was priceless. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. And in that moment, I knew I was home. The midday sun glinted off the lake, a shimmering backdrop to the scene unfolding before me. My vacation home, the one I'd poured my heart and soul into renovating, was occupied, not by me. I parked my car a little way down the road, behind a thicket of trees, and watched. Kalista and Marek were unloading groceries from the back of Marek's SUV. "Be careful with those tomatoes, darling," Kalista trilled. Her voice carried on the breeze. "They're for that special salad Julian loves." Julian, of course. This wasn't a spontaneous family getaway. It was a party for Kalista's fiancé and his friends. My own son hadn't even thought to tell me. My heart ached with a familiar dull throb. I watched as they unpacked, their laughter echoing across the lawn. It was a beautiful day, the kind perfect for a family barbecue, the kind of day I'd envisioned sharing with my son and, yes, even Kalista. I'd always tried to make her feel welcome in our family. "Marek, are you sure you brought enough charcoal?" Kalista called out. "Julian's bringing half the football team." Remember, football team. This was getting better and better. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising anger. I wouldn't let them see me upset. Not yet. I had a plan. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Bethany, my property manager. "Everything confirmed, Mrs. Vance," she said. "They booked it under Mr. Julian's name, but Miss Kalista made the arrangements." "Thank you, Bethany," I replied, keeping my voice even. "You've been a tremendous help." Bethany had been invaluable, discreetly confirming my suspicions. Kalista had deliberately rented my house, knowing full well I wouldn't be there. She'd probably assumed I was still visiting my sister across the country. I hung up and leaned against the cool metal of my car, gathering my resolve. This wasn't just about the house. It was about respect, about family, about the subtle ways Kalista had been chipping away at my relationship with Marek, excluding me bit by bit. The voice notes, the edited photos, The casual omissions, they all added up. This wasn't just a vacation rental. It was a declaration of war, and I was ready to fight. I waited until they'd finished unloading the car and disappeared inside the house. Then slowly, deliberately, I walked up the driveway. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The familiar scent of pine and cedar filled my nostrils. My home. Darling, this is melting. I heard Kalista call from the kitchen. Can you grab some more from the freezer? I could hear Marek rummaging around. I can't find any, he said, his voice muffled. Are you sure you packed it? Of course, I'm sure, Kalista retorted, her voice sharp. I put it right next to her voice trailed off as she walked into the living room and saw me standing there. Her face paled. Lorraine, she stammered. What are you doing here? Marek emerged from the kitchen, a look of confusion on his face. Mom, he said, I didn't expect you. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I don't imagine you did. I walked over to the window overlooking the lake. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It's a beautiful view, isn't it? I asked, my gaze fixed on the shimmering water. I'm so glad I could share it with you. Kalista and Marek exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of them spoke. The silence hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken questions and accusations. I turned to face them, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Now, I said, my voice regaining its strength, shall we discuss the sleeping arrangements? The blood drained from Kalista's face. She looked like she might faint. Marek opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The front door opened again, and a small voice called out. Grandma, my granddaughter, Ava, ran towards me, her arms outstretched. I knew you'd come, she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. I knelt down and embraced her, a wave of warmth washing over me. Ava's unexpected arrival had shifted the dynamic in the room, a subtle but significant change. The look on Kalista's face was priceless. It was a look of defeat, of realization, and in that moment, I knew I had won. The battle, perhaps, but not the war. The familiar scent of pine needles and damp earth hit me as I unlocked the cabin. My vacation home, or so I thought. I'd been planning a quiet weekend here, soaking in the mountain air, but Mr. Henderson, my property manager, had called with a strange story about unexpected guests. He'd been apologetic, flustered even. Mrs. Davies, he stammered, there seems to be a misunderstanding. Your daughter-in-law, Kalista, booked the cabin for the weekend. She said you knew. My heart sank. Knew. Kalista hadn't breathed a word to me. It was just another brick in the wall she'd been building between me and my family. The wall she'd started constructing with that saccharine voice note about the family reunion. The one where she so wished I could have joined them, while simultaneously making it clear I wasn't invited. Just a small gathering, Mom, she'd chirped. Mostly Julian's side of the family. Wouldn't want to overwhelm you, dear. Now, standing in the doorway of my own cabin, the raw sting of exclusion washed over me again. But this time, something was different. This wasn't just a voice note. This was my space, my sanctuary, and Kalista had invaded it, assuming I wouldn't notice, assuming I wouldn't care. Well, I muttered to myself, pushing the door open wider. Let's see how she explains this. The cabin was filled with the aroma of coffee and something sweet baking. Voices drifted from the kitchen, Kalista's high-pitched laughter ringing above the others. I stepped inside, my footsteps muffled by the thick rugs. The living room was a whirlwind of unpacked suitcases and discarded shoes. Toys were scattered across the floor. Ava's favorite teddy bear lay abandoned by the fireplace. My granddaughter. Seeing her things here, in my home, yet knowing I hadn't been invited to share this moment with her, tightened the knot in my stomach. On the mantelpiece, I noticed a cluster of framed photographs, family photos. I walked closer, my breath catching in my throat. There they were, Kalista, Julian, Marek, and Ava beaming at the camera in various poses. Beach vacations, birthday parties, holidays, a chronicle of their lives together, and in none of them, not a single one, was I present. It was as if I had been meticulously erased, airbrushed out of their family history. Happy memories, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. So happy, they forgot to include me. The sound of footsteps approaching startled me. Kalista emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile faltered when she saw me. "Mom," she stammered, her eyes widening in surprise. What are you doing here?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken accusation that I was the intruder, not her. I met her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. "It's my cabin, Kalista," I said quietly. "I thought I might spend the weekend here." Julian appeared behind Kalista, his expression equally shocked. "Lorraine," he said, his voice hesitant. We thought you knew. Kalista booked this weeks ago." "Yes," I said, keeping my voice even. "She mentioned it." My gaze flicked towards the photographs on the mantelpiece. "It's lovely to see all the family photos. You've created some wonderful memories here." Kalista's cheeks flushed. She glanced nervously at Julian. "Well," she said, her voice a little too bright, "we thought it would be a nice surprise for Ava. She loves it here." "Yes," I agreed. "She does." I walked over to the window, looking out at the familiar view of the mountains. I could hear Kalista and Julian whispering in the kitchen, their voices hushed and urgent. I didn't need to hear their words to know what they were saying. They were scrambling, trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected turn of events. How to manage the mother-in-law who had dared to intrude on their carefully curated family tableau. A small voice piped up behind me. "Grandma." Eva ran towards me, her arms outstretched. I knelt down and hugged her tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "My darling girl," I whispered, "I'm so glad to see you." Over Ava's head, I saw Kalista and Julian exchange a look of uncertainty, perhaps even a flicker of fear. They had excluded me, tried to erase me, but they hadn't counted on one thing. They hadn't counted on the enduring bond between a grandmother and her granddaughter, and in that moment, I knew this was just the beginning. I was back, and I wasn't going anywhere. The faint smell of pine needles filled the air, a subtle reminder of who truly belonged here. My gaze drifted towards the framed photographs on the mantelpiece, images of a family I had been excluded from. But this cabin, this place, This was mine. And this weekend, I would remind them of that. The midday sun streamed through the large bay windows of my vacation home, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I paused just inside the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the light and the scene before me. It was a tableau of casual familial bliss. Kalista, my daughter-in-law, stood by the kitchen island, mid-sentence, a glass of something bubbly in her hand. Her fiancé, Julian, sat at the head of the dining table, surrounded by friends I vaguely recognized from previous, carefully curated gatherings I hadn't been invited to. So, as I was saying, Kallista's voice faltered, her eyes widening as they met mine. The glass slipped from her grasp, shattering on the tiled floor, the sharp sound echoing through the sudden silence that had fallen over the room. A small gasp escaped from someone at the table. I simply stood there, my gaze sweeping over the faces of the assembled guests, each one frozen in a mask of surprise, some tinged with guilt. "Oh," Kalista stammered, her face paling. "Lorraine, what are you doing here?" She looked flustered, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. I stepped further into the house, my eyes still fixed on hers. "This is my home," I replied calmly, the words hanging in the air. I placed my handbag on the small table by the door, a deliberate, unhurried gesture. "I believe you'll find the rental agreement is in my name." My gaze flicked towards Julian, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He avoided my eyes, focusing on the remnants of the shattered glass on the floor. We thought you were away," Julian finally mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat and attempted a weak smile. "It was a last-minute decision, you see. A little getaway." My gaze returned to Kalista. "A getaway," I echoed, my voice soft but edged with steel. "In my home, without my knowledge." Kalista opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She glanced around the room, seeking support, but her friends seemed equally unsure how to react. This was clearly not the relaxed, exclusive weekend gathering they had envisioned. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze on me, a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and something akin to fear. "Grandma," a small voice broke the silence. My granddaughter, Ava, stood in the doorway of the living room, clutching a stuffed animal. Her eyes were wide, darting between me and her mother. Relief washed over me, a warm wave in the midst of the hasty standoff. Ava pushed past the cluster of adults and ran towards me, throwing her arms around my legs. "Grandma, you're here." I knelt down and hugged her tightly, burying my face in her soft hair. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm here." I straightened up, holding Ava's hand, and looked at Kalista. "I believe my presence here has disrupted your plans," I said, my voice regaining its composure. "Perhaps you and your friends would like some time to regroup." I gestured vaguely towards the door. "I'm sure there are plenty of other charming rental properties in the area." The implied dismissal hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Kallista's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't bother apologizing," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not interested in your excuses. I'm here to spend time with my granddaughter." I turned my attention back to Ava, smoothing her hair. "Now, sweetheart," What do you say we explore the garden? I hear the roses are in full bloom. Ava's face lit up. Yes, Grandma, she exclaimed, tugging at my hand. We walked towards the French doors leading to the garden, leaving the stunned silence of Kalista's disrupted party behind us. As we stepped out into the sunshine, I glanced back over my shoulder. Julian was helping Kalista pick up the broken glass, their faces etched with a mixture of humiliation and resentment. Their friends stood awkwardly by, whispering amongst themselves. I closed the French doors behind us, the sound echoing like a final punctuation mark. The garden was bathed in the warm afternoon sun, the roses a riot of color and fragrance. Ava skipped ahead, her laughter ringing out in the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet victory blooming in my chest. I knew this was only the beginning. Kalista's attempt to erase me from the family narrative had backfired spectacularly, and I had a feeling this particular vacation home held many more opportunities for reconnection, and perhaps, just perhaps, a little more recalibration. Noon found me standing on the porch of my vacation home, the same one Kalista had so smugly assumed she could occupy without my knowledge. Sunlight glinted off the lake, the same peaceful view I'd cherished for years. This wasn't how I'd envisioned spending my Saturday, but here I was, key in hand, ready to reclaim what was mine. My property manager, bless his heart, had tipped me off about the rental. Funny thing, Mrs. Hayes, he'd said, your daughter-in-law rented the place for the weekend. Didn't go through you, though. He'd sounded perplexed, and rightfully so. Kalista used her maiden name, he'd added, a detail that only solidified my resolve. It was a cowardly move, but also a careless one. I hadn't confronted Marek about Kalista's constant snubs. What was the point? He'd just stammer and try to smooth things over, leaving me feeling even more isolated. This time, though, I wouldn't be silenced. I pushed open the door, the familiar scent of pine and lake air filling my lungs. The sounds of laughter and chatter drifted from the back deck. Julian, pass the chips, I heard Kalista call out. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of anger and anticipation. I stepped inside, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. A quick glance revealed the living room was littered with discarded magazines, a half-eaten bowl of popcorn on the coffee table. They'd made themselves comfortable, hadn't they, Ava, darling? Don't spill the juice. Kalista's voice chimed again. My granddaughter. It had been months since I'd seen her, Kalista always finding some excuse to keep us apart. Mommy said Grandma's too busy. Ava had mumbled on the phone last week, her voice small and hesitant. Too busy. That stung more than any outright insult. As I rounded the corner to the deck, the scene before me froze. Kalista, mid-sentence, her hand hovering over a plate of burgers. Julian, mouth agape, a beer bottle halfway to his lips. And Ava, her eyes wide, staring straight at me. The silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. No one spoke. Kalista's face paled, her carefully applied makeup doing little to hide the shock. Mom, Marek's voice finally broke the silence, his tone laced with disbelief. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. What are you doing here? This is my house, Marek, I stated calmly. my voice steadier than I expected. I believe I have every right to be here. Kalista finally found her voice, though it was strained. But dog, we rented it, she stammered, gesturing vaguely around the deck. From the agency. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Did you now? I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Because the agency, as it happens, works for me. Kallista's eyes darted to Marek, then back to me, a flicker of panic in their depths. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing her. I think it's time you all left, I said, my voice firm. This is a family home, not a secret getaway for those who choose to exclude certain family members. Marek started to protest, but I cut him off. No, Marek, I said, my voice softening slightly. This isn't about you. This is about respect, about basic decency. Kalista has systematically excluded me from family gatherings, from seeing my granddaughter. This, I gestured to the cluttered deck, is just the latest example. I turned my gaze to Ava, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Her eyes, no longer wide with surprise, now held a different emotion. Understanding, perhaps, or maybe even sympathy. Grandma, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I knelt down, my heart melting at the sound of her voice. Yes, sweetheart, I asked gently. Can I give you a hug? She asked hesitantly. A wave of emotion washed over me, tears pricking my eyes. I opened my arms, and she rushed into them, burying her face in my shoulder. The tightness in my chest eased, replaced by a warmth that spread through my entire being. This wasn't just about reclaiming my house. It was about reclaiming my family. Over Ava's head, I saw Kalista and Julian exchanging uneasy glances. Marek stood frozen, his face a mask of confusion and regret. Let them stew this moment. This hug, this small victory, was mine, and it was worth more than all the vacation homes in the world. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the deck. As I held my granddaughter close, I knew this was just the beginning.